The rain came down in silver sheets, smearing the neon lights of the city into long streaks across the windshield. Liang Chen gripped the steering wheel with one hand, his jaw locked tight. His assistant had begged him not to drive himself tonight, but after the meeting with that arrogant rival, he needed space to think, or perhaps to burn. The words still rang in his head. Even the great Liang Chen can bleed. The rival's smirk, the veiled threat of betrayal from within his board, the sudden surge of doubt gnawed at him. Liang Chen was not a man accustomed to weakness. For 10 years he had built the Liang Group into an empire that stretched across continents. He had crushed competitors, acquired smaller firms with surgical precision, and built a reputation as a man of ice and steel. But tonight, the shadows in his chest felt heavier than usual. He pressed harder on the accelerator. The car leapt forward, engine growling. Rain hammered the road, but he didn't care. He welcomed the reckless speed, the bite of adrenaline. Perhaps it would silence the hollow ache clawing at him. Then, headlights. Too close. Too sudden. Liang Chen jerked the wheel, but the slick asphalt betrayed him. Tires screamed, the world spun, and the city lights shattered into a kaleidoscope of white and red. The last thing he saw was the other car skidding sideways, a horn blaring, and then, nothing. Su Yan sat in the corner of her small apartment, phone clutched tight in her hand, staring at the news headline that had just lit up the screen. Liang Group CEO, Liang Chen, in critical condition after collision. She blinked once. Twice. Then a laugh bubbled out of her chest, sharp and bitter, startling even herself. Liang Chen. The man who had taken everything from her family. The man who had destroyed her father's company in the name of business efficiency, leaving her parents bankrupt, broken, and humiliated. She could still remember the night her father had come home, shoulders slumped, hands trembling. Within months, he had fallen ill. Within a year, he was gone. And now, Liang Chen lay in a hospital bed. She should feel nothing but triumph, she told herself. Karma had finally struck. Yet something, an itch of curiosity, or perhaps a hunger for closure, compelled her to move. Before she realized it, she had thrown on a coat and was already hailing a cab into the night. The hospital lobby smelled of antiseptic and coffee left too long on the burner. People rushed past in white coats, clipboards tucked under arms, voices low but urgent. Su Yan's heels clicked against the tiles as she approached the front desk. She gave the nurse a name she had not spoken aloud in years. Liang Chen. The nurse's eyes flicked up, wary. And you are? For a moment, Su Yan froze. Why had she come here? What right did she have to ask? But before she could think of a lie, the word slipped out, smooth as silk. I'm his wife. The nurse's brows rose, but after a beat, she nodded briskly. He just regained consciousness. Room 1203. Wife. The word lingered in Su Yan's ears as she made her way down the corridor, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Her heart thudded, not with fear, but with something sharper, darker. Fate had just opened a door in front of her. When she pushed open the door to room 1203, the sight that greeted her stopped her breath. Liang Chen lay propped against white pillows, and 4 drip attached to his arm. His usually immaculate hair was damp and tousled, his skin pale against the sterile sheets. Yet even in this weakened state, he radiated a kind of restrained power, as if the room bent itself around him. His eyes opened slowly, dark and searching. Then they settled on her. You came, he whispered, voice rough from disuse. A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Soft, almost tender, a look she had never imagined on his face. Su Yan blinked. My wife, he murmured, reaching weakly for her hand. You're here. The world tilted. For a moment, she thought she had misheard him. Wife. Her pulse raced, her mind screaming that this was impossible. But his gaze was unwavering, filled with an almost boyish relief. The nurse's words echoed in her head. He just regained consciousness. Her lips parted, but no denial came. Instead, a slow, dangerous smile curved across them. Yes, she said softly, slipping her hand into his. I'm here. Hours later, after the doctors had left, Su Yan sat in the chair by his bed, staring at the sleeping figure of the man she had once sworn to hate until her last breath. He thought she was his wife. The irony was exquisite. Fate had not merely punished Liang Chen, it had handed her the perfect weapon. She could walk away now. She could leave him to his delusion. But why waste such an opportunity? For years she had dreamed of making him suffer, of stripping away the cold mask of control he wore. Now, he had invited her into his life himself, blind to who she truly was. Her fingers brushed the edge of the blanket, her voice a whisper meant only for herself. You destroyed my world, Liang Chen. Now I'll destroy yours, from the inside. And for the first time in years, Su Yan allowed herself to lean back, close her eyes, and imagine the taste of revenge. Sweet, glittering, and lined with silk. The steady rhythm of the heart monitor was the only sound in the hospital room. Su Yan hadn't moved for an hour, her gaze locked on Liang Chen's sleeping figure. Every so often, the man stirred, his brows knitting as if fighting phantoms only he could see. In his unconsciousness, he looked younger, stripped of the arrogance that had once made her grind her teeth in rage. And yet, when his eyes had opened earlier and he had called her wife, the shock had almost stolen her voice. She could still feel the heat of his hand, weak though it was, clutching hers with desperate familiarity. Now the reality sank in. Liang Chen had lost his memory. The ruthless CEO, the destroyer of her family's livelihood, the man who had seemed untouchable, suddenly saw her not as an enemy, not even as a stranger, but as the woman he trusted most. A dangerous, delicious idea unfurled inside her. If he thought she was his wife, then the world would treat her as such. The doors of his empire, of luxury, power, and influence, would swing wide open. She could walk through them, unchallenged, wrapped in silk and diamonds. She could ruin him slowly from within. Her father's voice seemed to whisper in her ear. Don't forget, Su Yan. He took everything. Her lips curved into a smile so faint it was almost invisible. Very well, Liang Chen. If fate wants me to be your wife, then I'll be your wife. The next morning, the room was brighter. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, catching on the stainless steel of the equipment. Nurses came and went, adjusting 4 lines and checking charts. When Liang Chen stirred awake, Su Yan was already seated at his bedside, looking as though she had been there all night. His dark eyes found hers instantly. Relief flickered there, softening the usual cold edge of his gaze. You stayed. I'll always stay, she replied smoothly. The words tasted foreign on her tongue, but her smile was convincing. His fingers twitched toward hers again, and she allowed it, letting him clasp her hand. Everything's blurred, he admitted, voice low. I can't remember much. But I remember you. My wife. That's enough. Her heart gave an unexpected jolt at his sincerity. She quickly smothered it. That's all that matters, she said, echoing his words. By noon, word had spread beyond the hospital. Liang Chen's survival had made headlines, and the company's board was already restless, demanding updates. A tall, sharp-eyed man in a tailored suit arrived at the hospital room with crisp efficiency. Su Yan recognized him at once. Tang Wei, Liang Chen's right hand. President Liang, he greeted, bowing slightly before turning his gaze on her. His eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. Madam. The word carried a weight of suspicion. Su Yan rose gracefully to meet it. Mr. Tang. Thank you for your hard work during this difficult time. Liang Chen's grip tightened protectively on her hand. Tang Wei, this is no time for formality. My wife has been at my side through it all. See that she is respected. Tang Wei's lips curved politely, but his eyes remained cold. Of course, President Liang. Their gazes met for a brief, silent battle. Tang Wei's skepticism was a blade. Su Yan's smile was a shield. Neither gave ground. Later, when Liang Chen had been taken for a round of tests, Su Yan stepped into the hospital corridor. The scent of disinfectant was sharp in the air. A familiar voice called softly behind her. Miss Su. She turned. Tang Wei stood there, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. You know me? She asked lightly. I make it my business to know anyone connected to President Liang, he replied smoothly. But that's the strange thing. I've worked beside him for years, and until yesterday, I never once heard of you. Su Yan's heart gave a tiny skip, but she tilted her head, eyes wide in mock innocence. Perhaps you don't know him as well as you thought. Tang Wei's lips curved faintly, though his gaze never softened. Perhaps. As he walked away, she exhaled slowly. He was dangerous. Too observant, too loyal. He would be watching her closely. But Su Yan had lied her way through tighter corners before. She could do it again. That evening, as dusk fell and the city's skyline glittered beyond the hospital windows, Liang Chen insisted she sit beside him. I don't remember much of the accident, he confessed, voice gravelly. But I remember your perfume. It was the first thing I smelled when I woke. That told me I wasn't alone. Su Yan smiled faintly, though a pang of guilt pricked her ribs. She wore no perfume. He was grasping at shadows, memories misfiring. But if shadows were what he clung to, she would happily become one. You'll recover, she told him softly. And I'll help you until you do. His dark eyes held hers, unguarded in a way she had never seen. I don't deserve you. She laughed lightly, masking the unease in her chest. No, you don't. But in the silence that followed, as he drifted back to sleep, she whispered words only the walls could hear. You'll regret ever mistaking me for your wife. 3 days later, Liang Chen was discharged from the hospital. The doctors cautioned him to rest, to avoid stress, to ease back into his routines. But a man like Liang Chen didn't know the meaning of rest. Even weakened, even with his memory scattered, he carried himself like a king returning to his throne. And Su Yan walked beside him, dressed in a soft beige trench coat Tang Wei had arranged for her, heels clicking against the polished hospital floor. The world saw them not as strangers bound by a cruel misunderstanding, but as husband and wife. Photographers had gathered outside the hospital gates. Security kept them at bay, but the flashing cameras caught every step as Liang Chen guided Su Yan into the waiting Rolls-Royce. His hand on hers was firm, reassuring. To them it was devotion. To her, it was shackles she wore willingly. The Liang family penthouse stood like a crown jewel above the city. When the elevator doors slid open, Su Yan's breath caught in her throat despite herself. She had known wealth before, at least until her father's ruin, but this was something else entirely. Floor-to-ceiling windows stretched across the length of the living room, offering a panoramic view of glittering skyscrapers. Crystal chandeliers dripped like frozen waterfalls from the high ceiling. White marble floors gleamed beneath her shoes, and elegant sculptures stood like silent sentinels in the corners. And then there was the silence. The kind of hushed, insulated quiet that only unimaginable wealth could buy. Welcome home, Liang Chen said softly, his hand at the small of her back as though guiding her into a sanctuary. Home. For a heartbeat, the word twisted in her chest. This was not her home. It was his fortress, the citadel of the man who had destroyed her family. Yet as she stepped across the threshold, her pulse quickened, not with fear, but with something dangerously close to exhilaration. This would be her stage. And she would play her role so flawlessly that not even Tang Wei's suspicious eyes could pierce the illusion. The household staff lined up to greet them. Maids in crisp uniforms, a butler with silver hair, chefs in spotless whites. Each bowed respectfully. Madame Liang, the butler intoned. The title sent a shiver through her. For years, she had been addressed with pity, scorn, or at best, indifference. Now, servants bowed to her, their eyes lowered, their voices reverent. She inclined her head gracefully, the picture of composure, though inside she tasted the sweetness of victory. This is Su Yan, Liang Chen announced firmly. My wife. From this day forward, she will be treated as such. As you wish, President Liang, the butler said. Su Yan caught the quick glance Tang Wei shot her from behind the butler's shoulder. Sharp, probing. She smiled sweetly at him, daring him to challenge her here, in front of witnesses. He said nothing. That evening, dinner was served in a dining room large enough to host a royal banquet. A table of polished mahogany stretched nearly the length of the room, though only 2 places had been set, one for Liang Chen, one for her. The food was exquisite. Steamed lobster tails with saffron butter, grilled wagyu beef, delicate vegetables carved into flower shapes. She tasted each dish slowly, letting the flavors linger. Across the table, Liang Chen watched her with a faint smile tugging at his lips. You like it? He asked. She dabbed at her lips with the napkin, meeting his gaze. It's more than I'm used to. His brow furrowed slightly, confusion flickering. That's strange. I always thought you. He broke off, pressing his fingers to his temple. A sharp ache lanced across his features. Su Yan's fork froze mid-air. Liang Chen. He shook his head as though trying to clear it. It's nothing. Just fragments. They don't fit. Her heart pounded. For a terrifying second, she thought the ruse might shatter here now. But then he leaned back, letting out a low laugh. No matter. As long as you're here, the rest will come back in time. Relief swept through her, but it was laced with dread. His memory would return eventually. She couldn't fool him forever. All the more reason to take what she wanted before that day came. After dinner, she explored the penthouse alone while Liang Chen rested. Every room seemed designed to flaunt wealth. Silk drapes, velvet sofas, chandeliers, polished silver frames with photographs of landscapes and abstract art. Not a single family portrait, she noticed. Not even one of Liang Chen himself. The man lived surrounded by beauty but not warmth. In the master bedroom, she stood before a vast wardrobe lined with suits, silk ties, Italian shoes polished to a mirror sheen. On the opposite side, she found empty shelves. Rows and rows of unused space, as if waiting to be filled. Her lips curled. So this was where a wife's belongings would go. Fate had handed her not just a role, but a throne beside him. She ran her fingers across the empty shelves and whispered, "Soon." Later, when she returned to check on Liang Chen, she found him awake, sitting in bed with a book open on his lap. "You should rest," she said, surprised. "I can't," he admitted. "If I stay still too long, my mind starts pulling at threads I can't follow. It's frustrating." She hesitated. "And what do you find at the end of those threads?" "Nothing," he said with a weary smile. "Just shadows. But when I see you, the shadows fade. That's how I know you're real." Her chest tightened unexpectedly. She told herself it was pity. Pity for a man who had once been invincible, now reduced to clinging to illusions. But the warmth in his gaze unsettled her more than his power ever had. She forced herself to smile. "Then I'll stay close, so you won't lose your way." His eyes softened. "Always." The word lingered between them, heavier than silk, sharper than glass. When the lights dimmed and the city glowed far below, Su Yan stood at the window, her reflection merging with the skyline. For the first time, she wasn't standing outside looking in. She was here, inside the world that had once been stolen from her. The memory of her father's broken figure rose unbidden, the nights of hunger, the years of clawing back dignity piece by piece. All of it had led her here. Now she would take everything. And yet, as she glanced back at Liang Chen's sleeping figure, his face unguarded in the shadows, she felt an unfamiliar flicker in her chest. A question she didn't dare ask herself. The next morning, the Liang Group penthouse hummed with quiet activity. The soft clatter of shoes across marble floors, the hushed murmur of staff, the distant roar of the city below. It was a world entirely detached from the streets Su Yan had once walked. She moved through it like a shadow, her presence acknowledged by all but questioned by none. Except one. Tang Wei. He had watched her closely since the day she stepped into Liang Chen's life. Sharp, deliberate, observing every gesture and glance. There was something about her that didn't fit. Not the profile of a woman who belonged to the empire she now inhabited. Not the way her eyes sparkled with a hint of calculation behind every smile. "Morning," Su Yan said pleasantly as she entered the breakfast room. Sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting the silverware in gold highlights. Tang Wei barely nodded. His gaze remained fixed on her, assessing. "President Liang has requested your presence in his study immediately," he said. "There are updates on the Shanghai acquisition." Su Yan inclined her head politely. "Of course. Lead the way." The study was immaculate. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the walls, with volumes on business strategy, law, and world history neatly arranged. The desk itself gleamed under a polished mahogany surface, stacks of documents fanned out in precise order. Liang Chen sat behind it, leaning back in his leather chair, eyes hooded but attentive. "Su Yan," he greeted warmly. "I want you to see this." He handed her a document, a proposal for a joint venture. Su Yan scanned it, nodding thoughtfully, though only half her attention rested on the numbers and projections. The other half was on Tang Wei, who hovered near the doorway like a hawk. "Anything?" Liang Chen asked. She smiled. "It's sound. I recommend moving forward." Tang Wei's eyes narrowed. He stepped closer. "Madam, with all due respect, may I suggest a revision? There's a clause here that could be risky if not adjusted." Su Yan turned to him, masking her irritation with a polite nod. Thank you, Tang Wei. I'll review it carefully. He didn't leave. His eyes lingered, sharp and questioning, and she felt the first prickle of unease. After the meeting, Su Yan wandered into the lounge, needing a moment to breathe. Her reflection in the tall glass window stared back at her. Flawless hair, carefully tailored clothes, and eyes that had learned to hide ambition behind charm. Yet underneath it all, her pulse raced. Tang Wei was not just a loyal assistant. He was a threat. One slip, one moment of distraction, and he could unravel everything she had built. She sank into the velvet sofa, running her hands over the silk cushions, and let herself imagine the life she had always wanted. Designer clothes, the city's finest restaurants, power whispered in corridors where she had once been invisible. This was hers now. Temporarily, she reminded herself, but for the first time, the fantasy didn't feel hollow. Evening came, and the penthouse took on a different air. Shadows stretched across the floors, and the city lights reflected in the windows like stars trapped behind glass. Liang Chen returned from a short meeting, his steps silent on the marble. Su Yan, he said, leaning against the doorframe of the study. Tang Wei is worried about you. I've seen him watch you more than once today. She blinked, caught off guard. Worried? Yes, he said. His gaze softened. He's loyal to me. He wants to protect me. But, he shrugged, a rare sign of vulnerability. He doesn't trust you. The words made her chest tighten. She forced a smile. It's understandable. I would be cautious too if I were in his position. Liang Chen studied her for a long moment. I trust you. She forced herself to hold his gaze, hiding the calculation behind her smile. Thank you. Later, when Liang Chen had retired for the night, Su Yan sat in the lounge, reviewing the documents from earlier. Her thoughts wandered to Tang Wei. He was perceptive, meticulous, almost impossibly loyal. He reminded her of the obstacles she had faced in her own life. Friends who turned enemies, colleagues who envied her rise, strangers who saw her as nothing. And yet, in a strange way, he fascinated her. He was a man who demanded truth, who saw through pretense, and she had never encountered someone quite like that before. A knock at the door startled her. Madam, Tang Wei said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. May I speak freely? She gestured for him to sit. Of course. He hesitated, then said, I need to know. Are you really who you say you are? Su Yan's lips curved into a smile that was both sweet and dangerous. Tang Wei, do you truly want the answer? His eyes didn't waver. Yes. She leaned back, letting the silence stretch. Every second was a test, a dance. Then I suppose you'll have to trust me for now, she said softly. Or not. He stared at her for a long moment, then stood abruptly. Trust is earned, madam. And I've seen nothing yet. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving Su Yan alone with the shadows. Her pulse quickened, not with fear, but with the thrill of the challenge. Tang Wei would be her greatest obstacle, she realized. And also perhaps her most potent test. If she could survive his scrutiny, she could survive anything. That night, as Su Yan gazed out at the city lights from the balcony, she allowed herself a small smile. The game had begun. And she intended to win. The elevator doors opened onto the 32nd floor of Liang Group Tower, revealing a world Su Yan had only glimpsed from behind tempered glass. The hum of activity hit her instantly. Phones ringing, assistants hurrying past with files, the low murmur of voices negotiating deals she could barely comprehend. Liang Chen strode beside her, every inch the commanding presence she remembered from newspapers and boardroom whispers. Su Yan kept pace, heels clicking lightly against the polished floors. This is your first real look, Liang Chen said, voice low but firm. Tang Wei has been keeping things simple until you were ready. But from now on, I want you to understand the full scope. Su Yan nodded, her fingers tightening slightly around the strap of her designer handbag. Full scope. A phrase that sounded like both a promise and a challenge. They entered the main boardroom. Floor-to-ceiling windows bathed the space in sunlight, reflecting off the long mahogany table where half a dozen executives already waited. Charts, reports, and laptops were open, ready for the day's negotiations. Good morning, Liang Chen began. His voice carried effortlessly across the room. This is my wife, Su Yan. She'll be joining our discussions from today onward. The executives turned to her, expressions polite, professional, but curious. Some raised an eyebrow. A few tried to hide smirks. Su Yan smiled gracefully, sliding into the chair beside Liang Chen. Her posture perfect, her hands resting lightly on the polished surface. She could feel Tang Wei's eyes on her the moment she sat down. Measuring, calculating. The first presentation was a merger proposal for a subsidiary in Shanghai. Numbers, projections, risks, and market analyses poured across the screen. Su Yan listened, nodding thoughtfully. "Do you have any questions?" Liang Chen asked, glancing at her. She hesitated. Her knowledge of corporate finance was minimal. She had studied marketing in college but had spent most of her adult life navigating the precarious world of a struggling family business. Yet here, she had to project confidence. "Have we considered the potential for regulatory delays?" she asked, voice steady. "And the impact on local partnerships if we move too aggressively?" The executives blinked. That was an astute observation. Tang Wei's gaze sharpened, scrutinizing her. Liang Chen leaned back, studying her expression. Then he nodded. "Good. I want you to keep asking questions. Don't hesitate." Su Yan allowed herself a small triumphant smile. Even if she didn't know every answer, she could learn fast. And more importantly, she could influence decisions subtly, nudging outcomes in ways that could serve her hidden agenda. The day passed in a blur of meetings, strategy sessions, and corporate briefings. Su Yan began to recognize patterns. The way Liang Chen's employees deferred to him instantly, the micro-expressions that revealed tension between colleagues, the subtle power plays that unfolded beneath polite conversation. She was learning. And she was enjoying it. During a short break, Su Yan found herself alone in the executive lounge, sipping a glass of sparkling water. Tang Wei appeared silently beside her, arms crossed. "You're learning quickly," he said, his tone neutral, but his eyes were sharp. She smiled faintly. "I have a good teacher." He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he studied her like a detective weighing evidence. "And yet," he said finally, "you're too polished, too composed. You've only been in this environment a few days, but you carry yourself like someone who's always belonged here." The words felt like a challenge wrapped in observation. Su Yan's heart quickened slightly, though she kept her expression calm. "Experience can be learned," she replied lightly. "And sometimes, confidence is a matter of practice." Tang Wei tilted his head, unamused. "Or a matter of deception. Be careful, madam. People notice the smallest inconsistencies in this world." Her lips curved into a faint smile, almost amused. "Then I'll make sure there are none for you to find." He left without another word, leaving her alone with the hum of the city below and the growing awareness that Tang Wei might be both her greatest obstacle and her greatest test. By evening, the meetings concluded, and Liang Chen returned to the penthouse. "You did well today," he said, his tone low, approving. "I noticed your suggestions. You have a sharp mind." Su Yan inclined her head, careful to mask the thrill she felt. Praise from him carried weight far beyond words. "I'm learning from the best," she replied. He studied her for a moment, and something flickered in his eyes. A rare softness, a trace of vulnerability. "I trust you," he said again, and she forced herself to focus on the words as a tool, not a temptation. Because beneath his trust, a danger lay. If Liang Chen's memory returned, if he discovered the truth, everything she had gained would collapse. And yet, she realized something she hadn't expected. This empire, this man, even his vulnerabilities, they stirred something in her that went beyond revenge. A pulse of admiration, of fascination, that she refused to acknowledge openly. She buried it beneath a layer of ambition and control. Tomorrow she would learn more. Tomorrow, she would continue her game. But tonight, as the city lights shimmered below the penthouse, Su Yan allowed herself a quiet thought. Even in the world of the powerful, even beside the man who had taken everything from her, she could carve her path. And perhaps, for the first time in her life, she could enjoy the view. The city sparkled like a treasure chest beneath the evening sky, its lights reflected in the tinted windows of the black luxury sedan that carried Su Yan through the streets. Liang Chen sat beside her, calm and composed as ever, but she could sense the subtle tension in his posture, the faint lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested fatigue, the tautness of his jaw even in repose. He had spent the day in board meetings, and yet he still held the air of absolute control, commanding the world around him without effort. She, on the other hand, was savoring every detail of the moment. Their destination was the city's most exclusive shopping district, a place where boutiques displayed gowns and suits that cost more than most apartments. Su Yan's pulse quickened as the car pulled up in front of an elegant storefront, the sign glowing in gold letters. "Shall we?" Liang Chen asked, his voice calm, almost teasing. She inclined her head, a smile playing at her lips. "Lead the way, husband." Even as she spoke the words, she reminded herself, this is a game. Everything is a game. Yet the thrill of it, the doors opening, the attendants greeting her with bows, the racks of silk and cashmere laid out like treasures, was intoxicating. She could almost feel the weight of her old life slipping away, replaced by this new reality of endless possibilities. The boutique's manager appeared immediately, eyes wide in recognition of Liang Chen. "Mr. Liang, welcome back." "And, Madam, it is an honor." Su Yan allowed herself a graceful smile. "Thank you. I look forward to your guidance." As the staff brought out gowns, shoes, and accessories, Su Yan tried to focus on the task at hand. Every piece was exquisite. The fabrics, the cuts, the way the light seemed to dance off silk and velvet. She had shopped before, but never like this, not with such abundance, not with every whimable luxury at her fingertips. She allowed herself to be measured for a gown, to try on a pair of heels that made her legs feel impossibly long, to marvel at the elegance of jewelry she had only ever dreamed of. And all the while, she noticed Liang Chen watching, not critically, but with a quiet curiosity, as if seeing her in a new light. "You like it?" he asked, gesturing toward a deep emerald gown she had just slipped into. She twirled, feeling the fabric flow around her. "It's beautiful." His gaze lingered on her for a heartbeat too long, and she felt a flutter she didn't want to acknowledge. "It suits you," he said finally, voice low, almost intimate. Her pulse quickened, and she forced herself to nod. "Thank you, husband." The word slipped out naturally this time. She winced slightly at its effect on her chest, but she masked it with a smile. As they moved from boutique to boutique, Su Yan began to notice the subtle interactions of the world she had stepped into. Store clerks bowed slightly, offering discreet recommendations. Luxury cars and black-suited chauffeurs waited outside. People recognized Liang Chen, though none spoke openly. In this world, power was both currency and armor. She reveled in it, yes, but even as she reveled, a small, uncomfortable voice whispered in the back of her mind. "Is it enough? Will revenge really fill the empty space in your chest?" She shook her head, denying the thought. Not yet. Today, she would enjoy what she could take. Tomorrow, the game would continue. Tang Wei, as ever, was a silent shadow behind them. He trailed slightly, arms crossed, lips pressed into a thin line. His presence was a constant reminder that she was being observed, that her actions were not entirely her own. "You've been quiet," he said finally, his voice carrying a subtle edge. Su Yan looked up, feigning innocence. "Just enjoying the scenery." He arched an eyebrow, unconvinced. "And enjoying the access, I assume. Be careful. People notice more than you realize." She smiled faintly. "I know. I'll be careful." Yet his words lingered like a shadow over the day. Even here, in the midst of silk and diamonds, the game had boundaries she could not yet see clearly. By evening, they returned to the penthouse. Su Yan's arms were laden with shopping bags, each containing items she had carefully selected, not merely for herself, but for subtle reminders of her new status. The staff greeted her with polite admiration, and Liang Chen, watching her ease into the home she now shared, allowed a small smile. "You did well today," he said. "You handled yourself in the stores, and at the meetings. I think you may surprise me yet." She paused, frozen for just a heartbeat, caught off guard by the compliment. "I thank you," she said carefully, bowing her head slightly. And then, alone in the privacy of her new bedroom, she allowed herself a moment of reflection. The thrill of luxury was undeniable. The taste of power was intoxicating. And yet, she realized something dangerous was creeping in. Her heart, which had been sharpened by years of grief and revenge, was beginning to soften. When she thought of Liang Chen, not as the man who had destroyed her life, but as the one who trusted her implicitly, who allowed her to navigate this world, she felt a flicker she did not dare name. "No," she whispered to herself, shaking her head. "This is revenge. Nothing else." Still, as she placed the emerald gown carefully on a mannequin in the room, her hand lingered over it a moment longer than necessary, as if she were imagining him seeing her in it. And for the first time, Su Yan realized that walking this line between deception and desire would be far more treacherous than any boardroom negotiation she had ever faced. The game had begun, but so had something far more complicated. The penthouse was quiet that morning, the city below still wrapped in dawn's soft haze. Sunlight spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long, golden rectangles across the marble floors. Su Yan sat at the breakfast table, a cup of coffee warming her hands. Liang Chen had stepped out briefly to attend a board call, leaving her in the rare silence of the home she now inhabited. For a moment, she allowed herself to relax, letting the events of the past week wash over her. The hospital, the first board meetings, the indulgent day of shopping. Everything had gone according to plan. She had her place by his side, access to his empire, and the thrill of the lie coursing through her veins. Yet something prickled at the edges of her satisfaction. When Liang Chen returned, he carried a small folder in his hands. His usual expression of cold calculation softened slightly as he approached her. "I have something to show you," he said, placing the folder in front of her. Curious, Su Yan opened it. Inside were documents detailing employee donations, charity programs, and letters from families helped by the Liang Group. "These aren't part of the business plan," she said softly, flipping through them. These are personal initiatives?" He nodded. "I prefer to keep them discreet. Many of the board wouldn't approve if they knew I was doing this personally. But I've always believed the company should help people, even in small ways." Su Yan blinked. The man she had imagined as ruthless, cold, and unfeeling had layers she hadn't expected. She had only known him as the predator who had destroyed her father's company, yet here was evidence of compassion, care carefully hidden behind his mask of steel. Tang Wei, who had followed silently into the room, cleared his throat. "President Liang." His eyes flicked to her briefly, sharp and calculating, before returning to Liang Chen. "The board is waiting for a strategy review this morning." Liang Chen nodded, then glanced at Su Yan. "You'll come with me?" She hesitated, the weight of her lie pressing against the subtle admiration beginning to creep into her chest. "Of course," she said, keeping her voice steady. The boardroom was tense. Executives shifted in their chairs as Liang Chen spoke, reviewing numbers and plans, making decisions with the precision that had earned him his reputation. Su Yan followed along, taking careful notes, occasionally offering suggestions that reflected what she had learned over the past few days. Yet despite the business at hand, her thoughts kept returning to the folder from the morning. Liang Chen wasn't merely a man who built an empire. He was a man who quietly tried to make it meaningful. And that quiet side, the kindness, the thoughtfulness, the glimpses of humanity, made her chest tighten unexpectedly. She pushed the thought away. Focus. Revenge. Later, during a brief pause in the meeting, Tang Wei approached her quietly. "Madam," he said, his voice low, "you are learning quickly. But I need to warn you, your position here is not secure. President Liang trusts you because he believes you are his wife. That trust can vanish in an instant if the truth is discovered." Su Yan met his gaze evenly, hiding the flicker of guilt she felt. "I am aware," she said softly. "And I will continue to earn that trust, every day." Tang Wei studied her for a long moment. "I hope for all our sakes that is true." When he left, Su Yan's fingers tightened around her pen. Tang Wei was dangerous, unforgiving, meticulous, and utterly loyal to Liang Chen. She would have to tread carefully. That evening, back in the penthouse, Liang Chen returned to the lounge carrying 2 cups of tea. "Su Yan," he said gently, handing her one. "Come sit." She followed him to the wide leather sofa, accepting the cup with a careful smile. "I want to show you something else," he said, placing a small photo album on the table. "These are from before the accident. Family events, trips, moments that mattered to me. I thought, perhaps looking at them together, you might help me remember." Her heart skipped a beat. She had expected documents, numbers, or schedules. Not personal memories, not this intimate invitation into his private life. Flipping through the pages, she saw photographs of Liang Chen laughing with children at a charity event, holding a small puppy, shaking hands with employees, smiling genuinely with friends. Su Yan's throat tightened. The man before her was complex, layered, more than the villain she had imagined. And yet, she reminded herself, he does not know the truth about me. As they closed the album, Liang Chen's eyes met hers. You've been at my side for a few days now. Do you understand me better? She hesitated, carefully weighing her words. I think I am beginning to, she said. He nodded as if satisfied, then added softly, I feel as though I can trust you more than anyone else. Her chest twisted. The lie she had built was gaining strength, but so too was a dangerous spark she had not anticipated. Something soft, fragile, and unsettling. Thank you, she said quietly, hiding the storm inside her. Later that night, as Su Yan stood by the window overlooking the city, she whispered to herself, this is a game. Nothing more. Everything else is a risk. But deep down, she knew the truth. The cracks in her carefully constructed lie were forming. Liang Chen's softer side, his trust, his unexpected vulnerability. Each was a thread threatening to unravel her carefully laid plan. And she wasn't sure she wanted to stop it. The sun had barely risen over the city when a sleek black car pulled up in front of Liang Group Tower. Inside, the air was taut with determination. Jin Hao, Liang Chen's fiercest business rival, was a man known for his ruthlessness. Where Liang Chen commanded loyalty through fear and respect, Jin Hao ruled through intimidation, manipulation, and a network of informants who whispered every secret into his ears. And today, he had a suspicion that made his pulse quicken. The new wife standing beside Liang Chen might not be who she claimed to be. He had heard whispers in the boardrooms, rumors passed along by disloyal executives eager to curry favor with the Liang Empire. A stranger, posing as Liang Chen's wife, moving through his empire with confidence far beyond her station. He smiled thinly, the kind of smile that meant someone was about to feel the weight of his intelligence. Meanwhile, in the penthouse, Su Yan was reviewing files in the study. Tang Wei had stepped out for errands, and Liang Chen had gone to the gym. The quiet luxury of the apartment pressed in around her, a gilded cage filled with opportunity and danger. A soft chime announced the arrival of visitors. Su Yan's eyes lifted to see the front desk monitor. Jin Hao, standing tall and confident, requesting an urgent meeting with President Liang. Her pulse quickened. She knew who he was immediately. The man responsible for decades of corporate rivalry, the one who had whispered poison into boardrooms and driven competitors into bankruptcy. And now he was here. Liang Chen returned from the gym shortly after, stepping into the study with his usual presence. Su Yan, he said, noticing her tense posture. Something wrong? She forced a calm smile. Just a visitor. President Liang. Mr. Jin Hao is requesting a meeting. Liang Chen's brow furrowed. Jin Hao. His tone sharpened. He's unpredictable. Are you sure it's safe? Su Yan's pulse thrummed in her ears. It is safe. If we are careful. The meeting took place in a high-rise conference room overlooking the city, sunlight reflecting off glass towers and river waters below. Jin Hao entered first, his dark suit immaculate, his eyes cold and calculating. Liang Chen, he said smoothly, inclining his head. A pleasure. I hope I'm not intruding. You're always intruding, Liang Chen replied evenly, though there was a hint of steel beneath the calm. What brings you here? Jin Hao's gaze swept over the room, lingering for a fraction too long on Su Yan. He arched an eyebrow, sharp and knowing. I've heard interesting news. About your wife. Quite the presence in your empire, isn't she? Liang Chen's eyes narrowed slightly, but Su Yan remained calm. She could feel the weight of Jin Hao's scrutiny, the way his gaze seemed to probe for inconsistencies, for lies. I assume you mean well, Jin Hao, Liang Chen said carefully. I mean business, Jin Hao replied smoothly, his gaze flicking to Su Yan again. I have offers, opportunities. All contingent on her being who she claims to be. Su Yan's heart pounded. He was testing her, perhaps offering wealth if she betrayed Liang Chen. A trap. Later that evening, alone in the penthouse, Su Yan recounted the meeting to Liang Chen, careful to measure her words. He tried to manipulate me, she said softly, leaning back in the leather chair. Offered wealth advantages. If I were to betray you. Liang Chen's dark eyes studied her. And what did you say? She met his gaze steadily. I refused. I have no intention of betraying you. His expression softened, almost imperceptibly. Good. Loyalty is rare these days. I trust you, Su Yan. That should never waver, no matter what he says. Her chest tightened. Trust. The word hung between them, delicate, dangerous. That night, as the city lights shimmered far below the penthouse, Su Yan sat alone by the window, the weight of the day pressing down. Jean Hao's presence had reminded her that her position was precarious. One wrong word, one slip of the mask, and everything she had gained could collapse. Yet even as fear gnawed at her, there was a thrill. She had resisted temptation, outwitted a master manipulator, and protected her carefully constructed lie. And somewhere deep within, she realized, her feelings for Liang Chen were no longer simply a tool. The lines between strategy, desire, and truth were beginning to blur. She whispered to herself, barely audible, I can survive this. And when I do, nothing will stop me from winning. The helicopter ride was silent except for the faint hum of the engine, carrying Liang Chen and Su Yan toward a secluded seaside villa owned by the Liang Group. The city fell away beneath them, replaced by rolling hills and the sparkling blue of the ocean stretching endlessly to the horizon. Su Yan's fingers traced the edge of her seat, not from fear of flying, but from the anticipation of what lay ahead. The villa was luxurious, a private escape from the pressures of the city, a place where decisions could be made, alliances tested, and the line between personal and professional blurred. Liang Chen, seated beside her, seemed unusually relaxed. His sharp jawline softened in the sunlight, and for a moment, he looked less like the untouchable CEO and more like a man simply enjoying the view. You look tense, he said quietly, his dark eyes catching hers. Is something wrong? Su Yan forced a small smile. Just taking it all in. It's beautiful. He nodded, turning his gaze back to the ocean. It's rare for me to have moments like this. Private, untouched. Away from all the expectations. Her chest tightened. She had expected this trip to be strictly business, yet the intimacy of the setting, the private villa, the ocean breeze, the gentle hum of the helicopter, was impossible to ignore. The villa itself was a masterpiece of modern design. Floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the ocean, minimalist interiors in shades of cream and gold, and an infinity pool that seemed to spill into the horizon. Su Yan stepped onto the terrace, letting the ocean breeze whip her hair around her face. Liang Chen followed, standing just a step behind her. Look at this view, she murmured, awe slipping into her voice. It's almost unreal. He said nothing, simply standing beside her, the warmth of his presence brushing against hers. The silence stretched, not uncomfortable, but charged. That evening, they dined on the terrace. Soft candlelight flickered across the table, casting shadows that danced on the walls and across their faces. Waves lapped gently against the shore below, and the smell of salt and sea air hung in the air. Su Yan, Liang Chen said suddenly, breaking the gentle rhythm of their conversation. Do you ever wonder what it would be like if everything were simpler? No businesses, no rivalries, no deception. Her heart skipped a beat. She looked at him, searching for signs, any hint that he was beginning to remember, or that he suspected her. But his eyes were steady, calm, and unguarded. I think about it sometimes, she admitted softly. Moments like this make you imagine a different life, don't they? He smiled faintly, almost wistfully. Yes. But even in this moment, there's a shadow, isn't there? Something we both can't escape. Her pulse quickened. She wanted to tell him she was that shadow, that she was the one responsible for the life he once knew, but she could not. Not yet. Instead, she sipped her wine, letting the taste mask the tension coiling inside her chest. After dinner, Liang Chen led her to the edge of the infinity pool. The water reflected the moonlight, silver and fluid, as though capturing the night sky itself. Do you swim? He asked, a playful edge in his voice. Su Yan hesitated. Occasionally. Not well. He smiled, a rare, genuine curve of his lips. Good enough. I'll teach you. The gentle teasing, the closeness, the intimacy of shared laughter. It was intoxicating. Su Yan felt herself slipping, even slightly, into the role she had never expected to play. Not just a wife in name, but someone Liang Chen could enjoy a moment of true connection with. And that scared her more than any rival, any boardroom battle, or any deception. As the night deepened, they sat side by side on the terrace, shoulders nearly touching. Liang Chen's voice dropped, quieter, more personal. Su Yan, I trust you. Completely. I haven't felt this about anyone in years. Not even my closest friends. You're different. Her chest tightened painfully. Every fiber of her being screamed that she should use this trust, manipulate it, exploit it. And yet, another part of her, one she had buried beneath years of revenge, wanted to reach for him. Not as a tool, but as someone she cared about. She forced a smile. Carefully neutral. Thank you, Liang Chen. That means a lot. He didn't speak again for a long time, only offering her a small reassuring glance. And as the moon reflected off the water, Su Yan realized something that unsettled her more than Jin Hao's schemes or Tang Wei's scrutiny. She was no longer certain her heart belonged entirely to her plan. The game was far from over. But now the stakes had become far more dangerous. Not for her reputation, or for revenge, but for her heart. The following morning, the penthouse was unusually quiet. Liang Chen had left early for a series of high-level meetings in the city, leaving Su Yan alone with the sprawling silence and the hum of the building's security systems. Her attention was drawn to the subtle movements of Tang Wei as he entered the room, his eyes scanning her carefully before settling on her face. "Madam," he said, his tone measured but edged with suspicion, "may I speak with you privately?" Su Yan tilted her head, maintaining her composure. "Of course." He led her to a smaller office adjoining the study, closing the door behind them. His sharp eyes locked on hers. "I've observed your actions closely over the past week," he began. "Your presence, your behavior. It's not entirely consistent with someone who has always been part of Liang Chen's life. I need to know the truth." Su Yan's pulse quickened. Tang Wei's suspicion had become tangible, a threat that could unravel everything she had gained. "I assure you," she said smoothly, keeping her voice calm, "I am who I claim to be. My intentions are to support President Liang and the Liang Group." He studied her for a long moment, reading her expression, weighing her words. Then he said, "Trust is earned, madam. Be aware that I will not hesitate to uncover deception." A chill ran down Su Yan's spine. Tang Wei was more than a loyal assistant. He was a guardian, a watchdog whose loyalty to Liang Chen was absolute. Yet she forced herself to smile. "Understood," she said. "I will continue to prove myself." Meanwhile, across the city, Jin Hao convened a private meeting with his most trusted executives. His sharp gaze flicked across the faces of the men and women seated before him. "The woman with Liang Chen," he said, voice low and commanding, "is not who she claims. She is an imposter. I want proof, and I want it fast. Every transaction, every interaction. Investigate everything. Find her weakness, and we will exploit it." His words carried a cold certainty. Jin Hao thrived on manipulation and control, and now he had a target within the heart of Liang Chen's empire. Back at the penthouse, Su Yan felt the first tremors of real danger. Jin Hao was not merely a competitor. He was a predator, methodical and relentless. And she had already seen his interest in her, the way he tested her in the boardroom, probing for cracks, for opportunities to strike. That evening, Liang Chen returned, exhaustion etched into his features. He had been on the move all day, negotiating partnerships and managing crises, yet he greeted Su Yan with a faint smile. "You handled yourself well today," he said, dropping into the armchair opposite her. "Tang Wei mentioned you asked insightful questions during the meeting." Su Yan inclined her head, careful to hide the tension from Tang Wei's earlier warnings. "Thank you, President Liang." He leaned forward slightly, his eyes lingering on hers. "I know you're learning fast. But..." His voice softened, almost vulnerable. "I trust you more than I should. That scares me sometimes." Her chest tightened. Trust. Every beat of her heart reminded her of the delicate line she was walking. "I won't betray you," she said softly, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Good. That's all I need to hear for now." Late that night, Su Yan sat in the penthouse lounge, reviewing documents related to the Shanghai subsidiary. Her phone buzzed discreetly, a message from an unknown number, warning her of Jin Hao's intentions. Her pulse raced. The warning confirmed her worst fears. Jin Hao had already set his plans in motion, probing for weaknesses, watching for any misstep that could expose her. Yet even in the face of danger, a thrill coursed through her veins. She had survived scrutiny, manipulation, and observation before. She could survive this. And perhaps in the process, she could gain something far greater than revenge. Mastery over the world Liang Chen had built. As she gazed out over the city, lights flickering like distant stars, Su Yan whispered to herself, "The game is no longer just about revenge. It's about survival. And about him." She didn't yet understand the depth of the feelings stirring inside her, nor the peril of allowing them to grow. But she knew one thing with certainty. She would not be defeated. And in the shadows, Jin Hao's plans were already unfolding. Threats she had yet to see, waiting to test her cunning, her loyalty, and the fragile trust she had built with Liang Chen. The game had entered a new stage. And Su Yan was ready. The ballroom of the Grand Miramar Hotel glittered with chandeliers, crystal glasses, and the soft murmur of the city's elite gathered beneath the vaulted ceilings. Su Yan adjusted the strap of her midnight blue gown, feeling the weight of both silk and expectation. Tonight, Liang Chen was not just a CEO. He was a king among titans, and she, by his side, was expected to radiate the poise of a true partner. Tang Wei lingered slightly behind her, silent and vigilant as ever. His eyes scanned the crowd, noting familiar faces, whispering threats, and potential allies. Su Yan had learned to rely on him, not as a friend, but as a necessary observer in a world that measured trust in power and deception. Liang Chen approached her, his tailored tuxedo impeccable, dark eyes sweeping the room with quiet authority. "Shall we?" he asked, offering his arm. She took it, heart fluttering despite her careful composure. "Yes," she said, voice steady, hiding the thrill and tension of the night. They moved through the crowd, smiles exchanged, nods acknowledged. Executives, investors, and socialites whispered in admiration, or perhaps curiosity, at the sight of Liang Chen's new wife. Su Yan's pulse quickened. Every glance, every word could be a trap, a test of her composure. Jin Hao's presence in the city was a threat she couldn't see yet, but she could feel it, a shadow moving just beyond the glittering lights. Midway through the evening, Jin Hao appeared, dressed sharply, his dark gaze immediately finding Su Yan. He moved through the crowd with effortless confidence, stopping just long enough to whisper a single word to a mutual acquaintance. "Imposter." Her stomach twisted. He was probing, testing reactions, looking for cracks in her persona. Liang Chen noticed the subtle shift in her expression. "What is it?" he asked quietly, concern threading his tone. Su Yan forced a smile. "Nothing. Just someone I used to know from business circles." He studied her for a heartbeat but let it go, returning to his conversations with investors. The tension between them, unspoken yet palpable, hung in the air like electricity. A few hours later, the gala's main event began. A presentation of the Liang Group's latest philanthropic initiative. Su Yan stood beside Liang Chen as he addressed the crowd, her posture flawless, her smile radiant. But her mind raced. Jin Hao had approached one of the key board members, quietly planting doubts, questioning her legitimacy. If she faltered, even slightly, the entire facade could collapse. She adjusted her stance, let her charm and elegance radiate, and whispered under her breath, "Stay calm. Observe. Respond." And she did. Every glance, every gesture, every carefully measured word reinforced the illusion. By the time the presentation ended, the board members were reassured, the guests impressed, and even Tang Wei gave her a subtle nod of approval. After the gala, Liang Chen escorted her to the terrace overlooking the city. The night was alive with lights and reflections, the air scented with sea breeze and distant flowers. "You handled yourself exceptionally," he said quietly. "I noticed your interactions with the board. Subtle, precise. I'm impressed." Su Yan felt her chest tighten, not from flattery, but from the closeness, the trust, the unspoken connection forming between them. She forced herself to focus on the role she had to play. "Thank you, President Liang," she said softly. He studied her for a long moment, eyes dark and intent. "I'm beginning to feel something I haven't felt in years. With you I feel calm, trusted, safe." Her pulse quickened, and she looked away, hiding the tumult inside. "It's a lie. It's all a lie." Yet as she glanced at him, standing there against the backdrop of the city lights, she realized how much the line between deception and desire had begun to blur. Back inside, Tang Wei observed from the shadows. He had seen Jin Hao's subtle maneuvering and was already devising a plan to counter it. But he also noticed something else, an unusual tension in Liang Chen, an openness towards Su Yan that went beyond simple trust. And Tang Wei did not like uncertainty. He made a silent note to watch more closely, to ensure that neither deception nor desire could compromise the empire. That night, alone in her room, Su Yan removed the last layer of her gala attire. Jewelry, gown, elegance, all gone. She stood before the mirror, staring at her own reflection. The woman staring back was powerful, beautiful, and dangerous, but also conflicted. Jin Hao's threats loomed, Tang Wei's suspicion sharpened, and Liang Chen's unexpected trust weighed on her more than she cared to admit. She whispered to herself, a vow both chilling and uncertain. No matter what, I will win. Even if my heart begins to betray me. And somewhere deep within, she felt the stirrings of a truth she could not yet confront. She was beginning to care for the man she had once sworn to destroy. The morning air in the Liang Group Tower was thick with anticipation. Executives hurried through the glass corridors, phones pressed to ears, documents clutched tightly in hands. The city below pulsed with energy, but within the walls of the empire, an unseen threat had begun to unravel the calm facade. Su Yan arrived early, dressed in a tailored navy suit, heels clicking against the polished marble floor. Tang Wei was already present, reviewing security feeds and company reports with his usual meticulousness. "Madam," he said without looking up, his tone sharp, "I have detected irregularities in the Shanghai subsidiary's recent financial transfers. Someone may be attempting to siphon funds under Jin Hao's orders." Su Yan felt a cold shiver run down her spine. Jin Hao had acted swiftly, far faster than she had anticipated. Every instinct in her screamed that the moment for careful observation had passed. Now action was required. Liang Chen arrived shortly after, dark eyes immediately scanning the room. "What's happening?" he asked, voice calm but threaded with tension. Tang Wei stepped forward, his expression grim. "There's a potential breach in the Shanghai subsidiary. Unauthorized transfers, disguised as routine expenditures. We believe Jin Hao is orchestrating it." Liang Chen's jaw tightened. "Show me the evidence." As Tang Wei displayed the reports, Su Yan noted subtle inconsistencies in the transactions. Small, precise manipulations that required both knowledge and finesse to execute. She realized the threat was more sophisticated than even she had imagined. Her mind raced. This was a test, not just of the company's defenses, but of her own ability to navigate danger while keeping her secret intact. During the emergency board meeting called that afternoon, Su Yan sat beside Liang Chen, feigning casual composure while secretly scanning the documents, noting patterns, and spotting potential vulnerabilities in the attack. Liang Chen addressed the board with authority, delegating tasks, and demanding explanations for discrepancies. Yet every so often, his eyes flicked to Su Yan, as though sensing her insight, valuing her counsel even without fully realizing it. She offered subtle suggestions, a minor audit here, a security sweep there, and a recommendation to temporarily freeze certain transactions. Every word was measured, designed to reinforce her position while also countering Jin Hao's attack. Tang Wei noticed. A faint nod of approval acknowledged her subtle maneuvering, though he remained wary, reminding her silently. One mistake, and the truth comes out. That evening, after the crisis had been averted and the majority of Jin Hao's covert attack neutralized, Liang Chen retired to the penthouse lounge. He sank into the leather armchair, exhaustion etched into his features, but his gaze was fixed on Su Yan. "You were invaluable today," he said quietly. "I don't know what I would have done without your insight." Su Yan's chest tightened. Every compliment was a double-edged sword, a validation of her skills, but also a tether to the man she was deceiving. "I only did what was necessary," she said softly, her voice steady. He leaned forward, dark eyes searching hers. "No, Su Yan. You did more than necessary. You proved you can handle pressure, think strategically. I trust you. Perhaps more than I should." Her pulse raced. The words were dangerous. Trust. Confidence. A closeness she had not anticipated. She forced herself to meet his gaze evenly. "Thank you," she said softly. Later, alone in her room, Su Yan reflected on the day's events. Jin Hao's attack had been thwarted, but the stakes had grown exponentially. Tang Wei's vigilance was a constant reminder that every move she made was being scrutinized. And Liang Chen's trust, genuine, personal and unguarded, was becoming the most perilous element of all. She whispered to herself, "I cannot fail. Not now. Not ever." And yet, deep within, she felt the stirrings of a truth she could no longer ignore. Her plan for revenge had become entangled with something far more dangerous: her growing feelings for Liang Chen. The game had changed. The stakes were higher. And the line between deception and desire was beginning to blur. The night was unusually still in the Liang Group Tower. City lights shimmered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, reflecting off the polished marble floors like distant stars. Yet within the silence of the penthouse, tension had begun to coil like a serpent. Su Yan had just finished reviewing Shanghai subsidiary reports, ensuring no traces of Jin Hao's covert attempts remained, when a sharp knock echoed through the room. Before she could answer, the door swung open. Jin Hao stood there, dark and commanding, his presence filling the room. "Surprised to see me?" he asked smoothly, stepping inside. Su Yan's heart raced, but her expression remained calm. "Mr. Jin, what brings you here?" "Business, of course," he said, his gaze sweeping over her. "But I'm beginning to wonder, how much of what Liang Chen trusts is real, and how much is a carefully constructed illusion?" Her pulse quickened. He had discovered her presence was unusual, suspicious. One wrong word, one misstep, and her secret could unravel completely. "I'm not sure what you mean," she said evenly, keeping her voice steady. Jin Hao smiled thinly, the kind of smile that promised danger. "I mean you. The woman posing as his wife. How long before he discovers you are not who you claim to be?" Before Su Yan could respond, a shadow fell across the doorway. Tang Wei had arrived, his eyes sharp, his posture tense. "Leave," he commanded, voice low but edged with authority. "Now." Jin Hao's gaze flicked to Tang Wei, then back to Su Yan. "I'll leave for now. But remember, the longer you keep this up, the higher the risk. Sooner or later, the truth comes out." With that, he turned and left, the door clicking shut behind him. Su Yan exhaled slowly, relief and fear mingling in her chest. Tang Wei's presence had kept her safe, but the confrontation was a warning. Jin Hao's next move would be bolder. Later, Liang Chen returned, his expression dark. He had been briefed about Jin Hao's intrusion, but something in his eyes unsettled Su Yan. There was a faint suspicion, a flicker that hadn't been there before. "Su Yan," he said quietly, sitting across from her, "Jin Hao came by today. Did he bother you?" Her heart raced. She had to tread carefully. "He was insistent, but Tang Wei handled him," she said smoothly, careful to maintain composure. Liang Chen studied her, his dark eyes narrowing slightly. "I see. And you were honest with me?" "Yes," she replied without hesitation, keeping her voice steady. He leaned back, thoughtful, and for the first time, Su Yan noticed the faint trace of doubt in his expression. Not suspicion yet, but an instinctive wariness. "I can't let him see through me," she thought, swallowing the rising tension in her chest. "Not now. Not ever." That night, alone in her room, Su Yan replayed the confrontation with Jin Hao in her mind. Every word, every glance, every hidden threat. Each was a test she had barely survived. And yet, amidst the danger, there was another more dangerous awareness. Her feelings for Liang Chen were no longer just a complication. They were beginning to influence her decisions, cloud her judgment, and threaten the careful control she had maintained. She whispered into the dark. "The game isn't just about revenge anymore. It's about survival. And him." Her fingers lingered over the emerald gown from the gala, the one Liang Chen had complimented. A small, almost imperceptible shiver ran through her. Could she continue the lie, protect him, and still navigate the dangerous web Jin Hao was weaving? She didn't yet have the answer. But she knew one thing with certainty. The next move would determine everything. The line between deception and desire was no longer blurred. It was collapsing. The office lights of Liang Group Tower burned late into the night, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors. Su Yan sat at her desk, fingers hovering over the keyboard as she reviewed the latest reports from the Shanghai subsidiary. Every transaction was scrutinized, every email analyzed. Jin Hao's threat loomed like a storm on the horizon, and she knew it would not wait. Tang Wei stood nearby, silent as ever, eyes scanning security feeds. His presence was a constant reminder that every move she made was under surveillance, but also a shield against the dangers closing in. "Madam," he said finally, voice low, "there is a transfer scheduled for tomorrow morning. It's irregular and likely part of Jin Hao's plan." We need to intercept it. Su Yan nodded, swallowing her rising tension. She had to act quickly, carefully. One misstep, and everything she had built with Liang Chen could collapse. That evening, Liang Chen returned unexpectedly, his eyes dark with exhaustion and thought. "You're still here," he said softly, his gaze catching hers. "Working late again." She forced a calm smile. "Just ensuring everything is secure. Jin Hao is still a threat, and I want to be prepared." His dark eyes studied her, searching, and she felt the faint prick of guilt. He trusted her completely, yet that trust made the deception even more dangerous. "Sit," he said, motioning to the chair beside him. "Tell me what you've found." Carefully, she walked him through the irregularities, her words precise and professional, masking the tension coiling in her chest. He listened intently, asking questions, but also allowing her insights to guide the decisions. For a moment, the world outside the office seemed to disappear, leaving only the two of them, the hum of computers, and the unspoken connection growing between them. Later, as the city slept beneath the night sky, Liang Chen stood on the terrace, gazing out over the lights. Su Yan joined him silently, her hands clasped in front of her. "You've done well," he said, his voice low, almost intimate. "Not just today, but every day since you arrived. I trust you, Su Yan. Completely." Her chest tightened. The words carried weight she had not anticipated. Weight that made her heart flutter even as her mind screamed caution. "Thank you, President Liang," she said softly, forcing composure. He turned toward her, dark eyes searching hers. "I don't know why, but I feel something for you. Something real. I know it's sudden, but it's undeniable." Her heart skipped a beat. The man she had planned to deceive, manipulate, and use for revenge was confessing feelings she had not expected. She began but hesitated. I can't reveal the truth. Not now." Instead, she smiled faintly, keeping her tone neutral. "I feel the same. I do." The words hung in the air. Delicate. Dangerous. She had said them not entirely falsely. Her feelings were real, even if her motives were complicated, but the lie was now entwined with truth, making every moment more perilous. Tang Wei's sharp presence reminded her of the stakes. Jin Hao had not stopped. He would strike again. And now, Liang Chen's heart was on the line. The night deepened, and the tension between them remained unspoken, electric, and impossible to ignore. The game is no longer just survival, she thought, staring at the city lights. It's about protecting him, and protecting the truth I can't yet reveal. And somewhere deep inside, she knew the coming days would test every skill, every instinct, and every emotion she possessed. The line between love and deception had never been thinner. The Liang Group Tower hummed with activity early the next morning, the corporate pulse of the city reflected in every corner of the glass and steel structure. Su Yan had barely slept, her mind racing through scenarios, contingency plans, and countermeasures. Jin Hao was no longer a distant threat. He was actively moving pieces on the board, testing boundaries, and probing weaknesses. Tang Wei arrived first, silent as ever, his presence a constant anchor. "The transfer I warned you about," he said without preamble, "is happening in 30 minutes. We can intercept it, but only if we act now." Su Yan's pulse quickened. She had studied the numbers carefully, traced patterns, and identified potential loopholes. One wrong move, and not only could Jin Hao's plan succeed, but Liang Chen might also suspect her involvement. "We do it together," she said, voice calm but firm. "You handle security protocols. I'll handle the financial side. No mistakes." Tang Wei's gaze met hers, sharp and assessing, then he nodded. "Agreed. Let's proceed." 30 minutes later, in the nerve center of the Liang Group security operations, Su Yan worked alongside Tang Wei, fingers flying across the keyboard, rerouting transactions, freezing suspicious accounts, and initiating an internal audit. Every step was calculated, every decision precise. A soft beep indicated that the first irregular transaction had been intercepted. Su Yan allowed herself a small, controlled breath. One by one, they neutralized Jin Hao's covert moves, each victory a step closer to protecting both the empire and the fragile trust she had built with Liang Chen. But even as relief began to settle, a new danger loomed, Liang Chen himself. He arrived unexpectedly in the control room, eyes dark, presence commanding. I heard about the intervention, he said quietly, studying the screens and then turning his gaze to Su Yan. You were involved? Her pulse quickened. One misstep could betray the truth. Yes, she said smoothly. I noticed the irregularities yesterday and coordinated with Tang Wei to prevent the transfers. Liang Chen's eyes narrowed slightly, as if reading between the lines. I see. You've been very proactive. She forced a calm smile. I only want to protect the company. President Liang. And you. His gaze lingered on her for a long, tense moment. Something in his expression, an unspoken suspicion, a flicker of doubt, sent a jolt through her chest. The line between loyalty and deceit had never felt so delicate. Later, in the privacy of the penthouse, Su Yan reflected on the day's events. Jin Hao's attack had been thwarted, but the consequences were far-reaching. Liang Chen had noticed her involvement. Not fully, not yet, but enough to make her pulse tighten. And her feelings for him, already dangerous, were growing stronger, more complicated, more impossible to conceal. She touched the emerald gown from the gala, the one he had complimented, and whispered into the night. I cannot let him know. Not now. Not ever. I will protect him, the company, and my secret. Even if my heart betrays me in the process. The next morning, Su Yan was already at the office, reviewing security protocols and subsidiary reports. Tang Wei arrived, a hint of respect in his eyes. You handled the situation admirably, madam. But be aware. Jin Hao will not stop. He's calculating. He's patient. And he knows the closer he gets, the more he can manipulate you, or President Liang. Su Yan met his gaze evenly. Then I will be ready. I will anticipate him before he acts. Tang Wei studied her for a long moment, suspicion mingled with reluctant admiration. You are more dangerous than I anticipated. A small, almost imperceptible smile curved her lips. Yes, she thought. But so is he, Liang Chen. And he will be the hardest to navigate. As the sun set over the city, Su Yan gazed out over the skyline from the penthouse terrace. Jin Hao's shadow loomed over the empire, Tang Wei's vigilance was unyielding, and Liang Chen's trust and growing feelings were entwined with danger in ways she could no longer ignore. The line between deception, desire, and survival had collapsed completely. And Su Yan knew one truth. The coming days would demand every ounce of cunning, courage, and heart she possessed. The game was far from over. The penthouse was bathed in the soft golden light of late afternoon. Su Yan sat by the terrace window, fingers wrapped around a warm cup of tea, her mind racing. Jin Hao's moves had grown bolder, Tang Wei's scrutiny more acute, and Liang Chen's trust, once a shield, now felt like a blade suspended over her carefully constructed lie. A soft knock at the door made her start. Come in, she called, masking the tension in her voice. Liang Chen stepped in, removing his jacket, his dark eyes scanning her face. There was a quiet intensity in his gaze that made her heart skip. You've been tense lately, he said, sitting beside her. Tell me what's wrong. Su Yan forced a gentle smile. Just the usual. Company matters, Jin Hao, the subsidiary transfers. Nothing you need to worry about. He tilted his head, studying her closely. Nothing. There was a subtle skepticism in his tone. Su Yan. I trust you, but I feel like you're holding something back. Are you hiding anything from me? Her chest tightened. The question was inevitable, yet dangerous. One slip, one wrong word, and everything could unravel. I'm just trying to protect you, she said softly, carefully choosing her words. That's all. He leaned closer, a hand brushing hers. The contact was fleeting, yet it sent a jolt through her entire body. I don't want you to protect me by lying, Su Yan. I want you by my side, truly by my side. Her pulse raced. His words, his trust, and the faint warmth of his hand created a dangerous mix of temptation and fear. She smiled faintly, hiding the turmoil within. Yes, she whispered. By your side. Meanwhile, Tang Wei monitored the Shanghai subsidiary remotely, his brows furrowed. Jin Hao's attacks had escalated, this time subtle manipulations in contracts, falsified communications, and attempts to sow discord within the board. He caught Su Yan reviewing the same files and observed her actions with sharp eyes. Something about her efficiency, the way she anticipated Jin Hao's moves, stirred suspicion. Too capable, too precise, Tang Wei thought. What exactly is she hiding? He made a mental note. He would need to watch her even more closely, even as she proved invaluable in countering Jin Hao's schemes. Later that evening, Su Yan joined Liang Chen on the terrace overlooking the city. The skyline shimmered like 1,000 tiny stars, but the world felt impossibly heavy. "You've been incredible today," Liang Chen said quietly, his voice soft but intense. "I don't know how you do it. Always steps ahead, always prepared. I feel like I can trust you completely." Her chest tightened painfully. Trust. Every word he spoke was a test, a temptation, and a threat all at once. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice steady despite the storm within. I want to be someone you can rely on." He studied her for a long moment, eyes dark and searching. "I feel something I haven't felt in years. I don't want to let it go." Her breath caught. The closeness, the trust, the intimacy. It was more than she had anticipated, more than she could control. "I feel the same," she said, forcing the words past the tightness in her chest. The city lights flickered below them as a quiet moment of vulnerability passed between them. But beyond the glass walls, the world remained dangerous. Jin Hao was still plotting, still scheming. Tang Wei's suspicion was rising, and Su Yan's carefully constructed lie was thinner than ever. The line between love, trust, and deception was no longer just blurred, it was collapsing. And Su Yan knew the next move she made could determine not just her survival, but the fate of the man she had begun to care for more than she should admit. The Liang Group Tower felt unusually tense that morning. The usual hum of the city seemed muted, overshadowed by the undercurrent of corporate danger. Su Yan arrived early, reviewing reports and tracing any sign of irregular activity from Jin Hao's operatives. Tang Wei appeared silently, his expression sharper than usual. "Madam, Jin Hao has escalated his plan," he said, voice low. "He's attempting to manipulate the board directly, using falsified documents to discredit President Liang. This is not a minor attack. He's aiming to destabilize the entire empire." Su Yan's chest tightened. She had anticipated danger, but the stakes were now far higher. One misstep, one overlooked detail, and everything could collapse. Not just her position, but Liang Chen's empire. Meanwhile, in a nearby luxury hotel, Jin Hao reviewed his final preparations. His gaze was cold, calculating. He had studied Liang Chen's routines, the subsidiary reports, and now the mysterious wife who had inserted herself into every key decision. "She's clever," he murmured to his assistant. "Too clever for a typical imposter. But everyone has a flaw. Find it. Exploit it. That is how we win." Back in the tower, Su Yan had already noticed the anomalies. A sudden push to vote on a controversial merger, falsified board memos, and subtle attempts to undermine Liang Chen's authority. She acted quickly, notifying Tang Wei and initiating internal audits to counter every move. Later, as the board meeting convened, tension crackled in the air. Liang Chen sat at the head of the table, sharp-eyed and commanding. Su Yan took her seat beside him, maintaining her composure, hiding the storm of calculations racing through her mind. The falsified documents were presented by one of Jin Hao's planted executives, designed to implicate Liang Chen in a financial misstep. Murmurs spread across the room. Board members glanced at one another, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. Su Yan took a deep breath. She had anticipated this move. "If I may," she said smoothly, standing, "I've traced these transactions and reviewed the associated communications. These documents are falsified. I can show evidence directly from our internal servers." All eyes turned to her, including Liang Chen's. Tang Wei's expression was unreadable but intense, a silent reminder of the stakes. Carefully, she laid out the proof, exposing the discrepancies and tracing the manipulation back to Jin Hao's operatives. The board's murmurs turned to shock, then grudging respect. Liang Chen's gaze met hers, a flash of gratitude and something deeper. Trust, admiration, and perhaps the first flicker of genuine affection. Later, in the privacy of the penthouse, Tang Wei confronted Su Yan, suspicion burning in his eyes. "Madam," he said bluntly, "you handled Jin Hao's attack flawlessly. But I cannot ignore that you anticipated every move with an unusual insight. How is it possible for someone so new to the company to act with such precision?" Her heart skipped a beat. Tang Wei's suspicions were dangerously close to uncovering the truth. "I've studied the company, Tang Wei," she said carefully, keeping her tone calm. "I want to protect President Liang. That's all." He studied her for a long moment, suspicion and admiration warring in his expression. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Very well. But know this, one misstep, and I will uncover the truth. For his sake, I hope your loyalty is genuine." That night, alone on the terrace, Su Yan gazed out over the city lights. Jin Hao's attack had been thwarted, Tang Wei's scrutiny had grown more intense, and Liang Chen's trust and growing affection was a dangerous weight on her heart. She whispered to herself, "I cannot fail. I will protect him. And I will survive. No matter the cost." Yet deep inside, a part of her feared that her heart might betray her before her carefully laid plans ever had the chance. The game was far from over. And the next move would determine not just her survival, but the fate of the man she had come to care for more than she had ever expected. The city lights of Shanghai glimmered like 1,000 scattered diamonds as night fell, but the Liang Group Tower burned brighter, a fortress of power and vigilance. Inside, tension crackled through the air as Su Yan reviewed reports and security logs. Jin Hao's latest move had been audacious. He had coordinated an attempt to hijack a major overseas merger, intending to cripple Liang Chen's reputation and destabilize the company. Every executive in the company had been targeted with falsified contracts, doctored emails, and threats designed to create chaos. Tang Wei stood behind her, his posture taut with alertness. "Madam, if this succeeds, it will devastate the company. We need to act immediately." Su Yan's fingers flew over the keyboard, rerouting contracts, verifying communications, and coordinating with overseas legal teams. Every second counted. Meanwhile, Liang Chen arrived unexpectedly, his presence commanding as ever. He stepped into the operations room, dark eyes scanning the screens. "You're here," Su Yan said, trying to keep her voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through her. "I came to see for myself," Liang Chen said, his gaze shifting between her and the monitors. "Something tells me you've been handling more than you let on." Her heart raced. "Not now. Not here. I'm just assisting Tang Wei with the audits," she said, careful to sound casual. He studied her, dark eyes sharp and discerning. "I see. You've been a very proactive. Impressive. But I must ask, why are you so invested?" She met his gaze evenly, forcing composure. "Because I want to protect you, and the company." His jaw tightened slightly, a flicker of suspicion, or perhaps curiosity, crossing his expression. The operation to intercept Jin Hao's plan began in earnest. Su Yan coordinated teams across continents, neutralized falsified contracts, and traced digital footprints back to Jin Hao's operatives. Every move required precision, speed, and a steady mind. Tang Wei monitored her the entire time, noting her brilliance but also the subtle signs of her emotional involvement with Liang Chen. Too careful, too precise, he thought. She's hiding something. Hours later, with Jin Hao's plot successfully thwarted, the adrenaline still thrummed through Su Yan's veins. She slumped into the chair beside Liang Chen, exhausted but triumphant. "You did it," Liang Chen said quietly, his eyes softening. "You saved the company. And perhaps more." Her chest tightened, both from relief and from the closeness of the man she was deceiving yet beginning to care for. "I just did what needed to be done," she said softly. He reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. The touch was fleeting but electrifying. "I don't know how you managed all this, but I trust you, Su Yan. More than anyone else." Her heart skipped a beat. Trust, so fragile, so dangerous. One wrong move could shatter it all. "I won't let you down," she whispered, even as the truth of her deception pressed against her conscience. Later, alone on the penthouse terrace, Su Yan gazed out over the city. Jin Hao's schemes had been thwarted, yet the danger was far from over. Tang Wei's suspicion was sharper than ever, and Liang Chen's growing feelings for her made every lie she told a risk. She whispered to herself, a vow filled with both determination and fear. "I will survive. I will protect him. I will keep my secret, even if my heart betrays me in the process." The game had reached its breaking point. The stakes were higher, the lines between trust and deception thinner than ever, and Su Yan knew the coming days would demand every ounce of cunning, courage, and heart she possessed. And deep down, She realized the greatest danger wasn't Jean Hao, it was herself. The city of Shanghai glittered beneath a moonlit sky, but inside the Liang Group Tower, tension pulsed like a living entity. Su Yan had been on edge for days, anticipating Jean Hao's final strike, and now the signs were unmistakable. Tang Wei appeared at her side, his expression grim. "Madam, Jean Hao is moving against us directly. He's planning to leak falsified financial evidence to the press, aiming to tarnish President Liang's reputation and force him to resign. If this succeeds, the company could collapse overnight." Su Yan's pulse raced. This was the ultimate threat, the culmination of everything she had feared and prepared for. One misstep now, and not only would Liang Chen lose everything, but her own carefully constructed deception could unravel. "We have to stop him," she said, determination hardening her voice. "Now!" Liang Chen entered the operations room unexpectedly, dark eyes scanning both the monitors and Su Yan herself. There was an intensity in his gaze that made her stomach twist. "You've been handling a lot on your own," he said carefully. "I noticed some inconsistencies in your reports. Nothing major, but subtle. Tell me the truth, Su Yan. Is there something you're not telling me?" Her heart skipped. "Not now. Not here." She forced a calm smile. I've just been ensuring everything is secure. President Liang. That's all." He didn't reply immediately, only studied her, suspicion flickering in his dark eyes. Meanwhile, Jean Hao's operatives moved quickly, trying to execute the final stage of his plan. Emails were sent to major media outlets, falsified documents were being uploaded, and chaos threatened to erupt. Su Yan worked feverishly, coordinating with Tang Wei to intercept the communications, trace IP addresses, and freeze accounts before the falsified evidence could go public. Every second was critical. "Almost there," she muttered, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "Just a few more systems to secure." Tang Wei glanced at her, a mixture of awe and suspicion in his eyes. "You're extraordinary, madam. But," his voice dropped, "I still don't understand how you anticipate everything before it happens." Her pulse quickened. One misstep, one word too many, and he might uncover the truth. "It's experience," she said smoothly, masking the racing thoughts in her mind. Finally, the last system was secured, and Jean Hao's plan collapsed before it could cause irreversible damage. Su Yan leaned back, exhausted but triumphant. Liang Chen's gaze softened as he approached. "You did it," he said quietly. "You saved everything. I don't know how to thank you." Her chest tightened. "I just did what was necessary." He reached out, brushing a hand across hers. The contact was brief but electric. "I trust you, Su Yan. Completely. Always have, always will." Her heart ached. Trust, a dangerous, fragile thing. She had risked everything to earn it, and now it was entwined with feelings she could no longer deny. She began, but the words caught in her throat. Could she reveal the truth now? Could she admit her deception? That night, alone on the terrace, Su Yan faced a choice. Continue the lie and protect the empire, or reveal her true motives and risk everything, including Liang Chen's trust and her growing feelings for him. Her hands trembled as she whispered into the night. "I will protect him. I will protect the company. And I cannot lose him. Not to my own deception, not to Jean Hao, not to myself." The game had reached its ultimate point. The stakes were higher than ever, the line between love and deception thinner than ever, and the choices she made now would determine everything. Survival, empire, and heart. And deep inside, she realized the hardest battle was no longer against Jean Hao. It was against her own heart. The morning sun poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Liang Group Tower, illuminating the city below. The storm of corporate threats and secret deceptions had passed. Jean Hao's audacious plans had been exposed, dismantled by evidence carefully gathered by Tang Wei, and by Su Yan, whose skill and courage had saved the empire. Liang Chen sat in the office, reviewing the final reports, his expression calm but thoughtful. The weight of past weeks hung in the air, yet there was a quiet relief. He had survived the onslaught, and the company was secure. But his mind kept returning to one question. Su Yan. Su Yan arrived, elegant yet understated, her heart pounding. The time had come to reveal the truth she had concealed for so long. Tang Wei had given her a cautious nod of approval from across the room, A silent reminder that honesty now carried risk, but also liberation. President Liang, she began, taking a deep breath. There's something I need to tell you. He looked up, dark eyes steady, expectant. I'm listening. She hesitated, gathering her courage. Everything I've done, the way I became involved in the company, it wasn't just by chance. I wasn't truly your wife before the accident. I came into your life with a plan, revenge, strategy to prove myself. I never meant to deceive you emotionally. But along the way, my feelings changed. Liang Chen leaned back, absorbing her words. His expression was unreadable, a storm behind calm eyes. Su Yan, he said slowly, voice measured. You risked everything to protect me and this company. You lied, yes. But you also saved everything I value. Her heart thudded painfully. Does that forgive everything? A faint, almost imperceptible smile curved his lips. It does. Because I trust you. Not the role you played, but you. And despite the deception, despite the lies, I know your heart. I see it. Tears welled in Su Yan's eyes. Relief, fear, and love collided, creating a whirlwind she had not anticipated. Tang Wei, watching from the doorway, allowed himself a small, satisfied nod. The empire was secure, and now the heart of the CEO, the man he had sworn to protect, was safe as well. Liang Chen stood and stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Su Yan, he said softly, I don't care how you came into my life. I care that you're here now. And I want you by my side. Not as a partner in pretense, but as my partner truly. Her breath caught. Are you sure? Completely, he replied, cupping her face in his hands. I've seen your courage, your intelligence, and your heart. That is enough for me. In that moment, the walls between deception and trust crumbled. Su Yan let herself lean into him, allowing the weight of the past weeks to fall away. I love you, she whispered, the truth finally free. I love you too, he said, pulling her close. The city below shimmered like a promise, a new beginning stretching endlessly before them. Weeks later, the Liang Group Tower buzzed with normal operations, Jin Hao schemes long behind them. Su Yan moved through the office with quiet confidence, no longer hiding, no longer deceiving. Tang Wei remained vigilant, but now as a trusted ally rather than a silent judge. Liang Chen and Su Yan often shared quiet moments, working side by side, watching the city from the terrace, or simply enjoying a rare, peaceful dinner together. The line between personal and professional had blurred, but now in a way neither feared. It was built on honesty, trust, and a bond forged through trials and triumphs. As Su Yan looked out over the skyline from her place beside Liang Chen, she felt a warmth she had never expected. The empire was safe. Jin Hao was defeated. And for the first time, she realized she had won something far greater than revenge or survival. She had won a heart, his heart, and had learned to trust her own in the process. Liang Chen's hand found hers, fingers entwining. Ready for whatever comes next? He asked with a faint smile. Su Yan smiled back, a soft, genuine curve of her lips. With you? Always. And together, they faced the future, no longer shadows of deception, but partners in both love and life, stronger, wiser, and inseparable. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more original web novels. And stay tuned, our next story is coming soon.